2022 looks to be filled with a bunch of RPGs, so it already looks like wherever you play, you'll end up getting something pretty good. We've got 20 upcoming role-playing games to highlight here. Obviously, release dates are subject to change. They very often do. Keep that in mind, but we got a bunch of good stuff, so let's get started off with number 20. Little Devil Inside just looks awesome. It looks like an incredibly fun adventure set in a unique world, a unique hero, unique monsters, and honestly, that's all we look for in some role-playing games. This one is still a little bit mysterious as well. It has been pushed and pushed, and we've only gotten little glimpses of it and only so many details, but just the atmosphere, the tone, the sense of adventure, but like in a weird, creepy way, some of the action we have seen, some of the exploration we have seen, all of it looks really promising. There's a real creative angle to this game. You can probably tell just by looking at it. We can't wait to get our hands on this one. Next, over at number 19, we have the new Fable game. Now, this one is a little bit of spitballing because we don't know if this is the year we're finally going to see it, but this Xbox-developed game should at least be revealed soon. All we got was a quick teaser announcement, and it's been quiet ever since, but they've been working on this game for a long time. It's from Playground Games, the people behind the Forza Horizon series, so while, yes, they usually focus on racing games, they're good at building interesting open worlds, so we're really pumped. The original Fable is one of my favorite games of all time. As messy as it was, there was something just so cool and charming about it. Will the new game be able to replicate that? Who knows? But for now, we're just gonna have to wait and see. Next, over at number 18, we have Dragon Age 4, another one that has still been pretty quiet on a lot of fronts, but hopefully this year is the year. It's been in development for a really long time and reportedly was originally intended to be a live service, games as a service type game where it's always updated. The game wants you to spend more money, endless questing, stuff like that. Apparently, they've went back to the drawing board and are making this a more traditional RPG like the previous games, and honestly, we'd love to see that. We do know there are some returning characters. We've gotten some cool glimpses with little teasers and lots of cool concept art and stuff like that, but really details are pretty slight. Die-hard Dragon Age fans are still foaming at the mouth for this one regardless, so we're gonna go on their goodwill alone, but this could be really cool. Now, next over at number 17, we have another Xbox RPG that we haven't heard too much about recently. It's Avowed. This is the Obsidian RPG. The teaser suggested some sort of Elder Scrolls-style traditional fantasy game, but of course, being developed by Obsidian, makers of some very good RPGs, it just means it could be potentially really cool. Again, there's not really too much to go on. We got an initial teaser trailer, so this might be the year we see it. Who knows for sure? We're being optimistic with some of these early games on this list, but as we move forward, more of the games are a little bit more definite. Because moving on over to number 16, we have Hogwarts Legacy, the Harry Potter RPG. Create your own wizard, go to Hogwarts, and go on adventures. Honestly, on paper, it sounds really awesome. Like, what more could you want if you're a Harry Potter fan, right? This one has been leaked, it's been revealed, it's been delayed and pushed, and we're hoping 2022 is the year because the potential is awesome. There is still so much room to fill in the blanks on Harry Potter lore and really expand the wizarding world in new and exciting ways, and a video game is really the perfect way to explore it. Next, over at number 15, we have Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. This is the Borderlands spin-off that is roughly based on an old Borderlands DLC that was around the quirky Tiny Tina character and her RPG fantasy stuff cooked up in her mind. So what we have here is a new Borderlands adventure, but set in a more fantasy-style world. It's like a Tiny Tina tabletop madness adventure, and it seems really cool. I mean, just look at the weapon types, look at the enemy types, look at the world style, look at the way you navigate around the world, and just how everything is structured. A little bit more old school. This has a lot of potential here. Obviously, from the trailers and the gameplay we've seen, it very much has that signature Borderlands humor, love it or hate it, but this one does look pretty intriguing, I'm not gonna lie. I'm looking for a new fresh spin on the Borderlands thing, and this might be it. Next, over at number 14, we have Babylon's Fall. This game is from Platinum Games, the people behind so many incredible games like Bayonetta, which hopefully we'll see that soon. But Babylon's Fall, at first glance, might not seem like much, but you know these guys are kings at combat, and that's what this game is really focusing on. And it is billed specifically as a new cooperative action RPG with you and up to 3 other friends, kicking ass in this cool, weird fantasy sci-fi world. It's got a bunch of different skills, ability types, weapon types, ways to level up, and just some of that RPG goodness with hopefully that platinum tried and true combat. This one does seem like it's releasing soon in the spring, but we're hoping to see more beforehand just because we'd like to know a little bit more about what the deal is here. Still, it's something worth keeping an eye on. Now, next over at number 13, we have Palworld, which, I'll be honest, this is a little bit more of a survival style game with some RPG elements, but we just really wanted to talk about it because, I mean, look how insane this is. This is essentially like a survival Harvest Moon, build your own place, survive, craft type of thing with all these quirky creatures that are, you know, kind of Pokemon inspired that you can collect and train and fight with and battle. But you can also engage in third-person shooting and build factories and have your little creatures build new assault rifles for you. This is so weird and quirky with a wild art style that is all over the place. We just managed to stumble across this one a while ago and we've been keeping an eye on it ever since just because it is so weird and it is slated for 2022. Now, next over at number 12, we have LX2. This is a sequel to a game we never thought would really get a sequel, kind of like a weird, lower-budget action RPG that was set in kind of like a sci-fi fantasy hybrid universe. It was really distinct. It was a very PC gamer-style game, but the people who spent a lot of time with it had a lot of fun playing it. It's kind of like a cult hit for a lot of people. You could grow your character into a really cool, interesting-looking badass, and now it's getting a sequel. LX2 is hopefully continuing the same thing, and it's releasing this year. Now, next over at number 11, we have Lost Soul Aside, which is kind of an action RPG project that was once very indie and more really a tech demo. It's now blown into this fast-paced action-adventure RPG with insane over-the-top combat and really cool graphics. What we have seen, the gameplay trailers and stuff like that, all of it is incredibly impressive. This is just one of those gorgeous, awesome action badass games, and this one might maybe tide you over until Black Myth Wukong releases. We've talked about that one quite a bit. That seemingly isn't coming until 2023, but, you know, if you're looking to scratch a similar itch, Lost Soul Aside seems like it might be it, and hopefully it finally releases this year on PlayStation consoles. Next over at number 10, we have Triangle Strategy, which might sound like a weird, boring board game your grandpa used to play while drinking coffee, but no, it's actually a pretty sick JRPG, at least from what we've seen so far, specifically because of the people behind it. It has the lead producer and seemingly a lot of the team members behind Bravely Default and, of course, Octopath Traveler. You might recognize some of the styles, some of the inspiration here, and this is releasing March 2022. Square Enix, you know, for all of its faults with certain games, they have been producing good traditional RPGs still. We hope Triangle Strategy turns out good and continues that trend and doesn't fly under the radar, because Octopath Traveler was also pretty sweet. Now, next over at number 9, we have Pokemon Legends Arceus, or Arceus. So this is the big one. This is the one a lot of people have been hoping for, a massive, ambitious, fully 3D open world Pokemon game. Even though we've gotten sort of that in the past, this is the one that's seemingly blowing it all out. You know, new Pokemon, a new version of a familiar region because it takes place way far in the past. It's almost like a Pokemon prequel if you're looking for that type of thing. And there's a lot of potential here. Some people have decried the graphics and said that the game doesn't look good enough, it looks cheap. Everybody comes to Pokemon games for different things though. Not everybody cares about the graphics for them. My biggest concern personally is just that gameplay. Is it going to be good? Is the exploration going to be satisfying? And how are they going to shake up the battling? Thankfully, we won't have to wait too much longer because it's releasing in the end of January. Now, next over at number 8, we have Stranger of Paradise, Final Fantasy Origin. So this is actually like a dark fantasy interpretation of the original Final Fantasy game. It's like a weird, crazy, ambitious idea with like some action role-playing combat. And the game was memed to hell when it was first announced, you know, the character and chaos and all that stuff. But beneath that, seems like a pretty cool, fun Final Fantasy adventure. You know, for me personally, Final Fantasy games rarely disappoint. I mean, here and there. And even though this one looks a little rough, people seem to really appreciate the weird, over-the-top, wacky demo that they released. And it's a cool collaboration between Koei Tecmo and Team Ninja, you know, with Square Enix, so anything can really happen with this one. I'm always into just new, weird Final Fantasy experiences, so let's see how this one turns out. Now, next over at number 7, speaking of Final Fantasy, we have Final Fantasy XVI. the real big one, which most recently was confirmed that development did slow down and was affected due to the pandemic, but we're going to be hearing more news on it in the second half of the year. And hopefully this thing could squeak in for the next holiday season, but we don't know for sure. Still, the brief things we have seen so far look pretty awesome. There's a bit more of a focus on action, but hopefully it still doesn't lose sight of its JRPG roots, of course. Cool character designs, an all-new story, and a world to jump into. That's the beauty of these games. That's what we want, and we're hoping this one lives up to the name. Like I said, we're going to be getting more info on it soon, finally, so keep your eyes peeled. We'll probably be talking about it in other videos. Next, over at number 6, we have Forspoken, another Square Enix action RPG adventure, this time set in an interesting world with a quirky main character and an emphasis on mage-like powers. It almost looks like you move around similar to an Infamous-style game, but with cool magic. There's a lot going on here, and a lot of the people involved, the developers, the writers, the actors, stuff like that, everything is top tier, but we're really curious to see how this game comes together. There have been more recent previews of the game from press and YouTubers and stuff, and more gameplay has come out, and you know, it looks like an absolutely gorgeous game, but we just wonder how much fun it is going to be to play. Still, the world looks interesting, the story sounds interesting, so we're gonna keep our fingers crossed for this one. Next, over at number 5, we have Starfield. This, of course, is Bethesda's next big thing. Now, some people, after Fallout 76, have completely written off Bethesda forever, but for those who have stuck around, you know, we're getting a new thing. We're getting something that they're making that isn't Fallout or Elder Scrolls, which that still just makes me excited despite some missteps here and there. There's a lot they could do here, and we're really excited to see what comes of it. A cool space exploration RPG. We've had them in the past, but we hopefully have never had one quite like this. It's still early though. All we got was like one in-engine cutscene trailer type thing. We haven't seen gameplay yet. We're probably gonna see more in the second half of the year, but this one's been a long time coming, and we're excited to see where it goes. Long story short. Now, next over at number 4, we have The Legend of Zelda, Breath of the Wild 2, or whatever they're going to call it. So, hopefully we get this one this year. The potential is huge. The last Zelda game, you know, Breath of the Wild, did have a lot of RPG elements, and we expect this to continue that trend. The story, or at least what is being teased here, and how everything is shrouded in mystery, does seem really interesting. It absolutely has me hooked. I cannot wait to see what the full deal is with this story, how it connects to the Zelda lore, how it connects to the original Breath of the Wild, but also how they're shaking up the gameplay, how they're keeping that framework of Breath of the Wild, but really blowing it out with new items, new tricks, new puzzles, new weapons, who knows. The teases we've gotten in the most recent trailer do seem pretty exciting, I'm not gonna lie. Hopefully this year is where we get all our questions answered. Now, down to number 3, Dying Light 2: Stay Human. Yes, we've talked about this one quite a bit. Don't know how much more we can say other than to keep it short. We really liked the original Dying Light. We liked its expansions. We liked how much the game was supported. We found it very consumer friendly in a lot of ways. And we're hoping this new one can keep up that trend. You know, it's got a lot of ambitious new ideas, more parkour, a bigger world, your choices really affecting the world around you. We've heard so many games say that before, but we're excited to see Dying Light's spin on that. It's got more of a focus on melee weapons. The world has broken down even more, so there are less guns, less technology. It's more medieval, and hopefully a lot more gory and action-packed. Thankfully, after so many delays, it looks like we're finally going to get our hands on this thing February 4th, 2022. Now, down to number 2, we have Horizon Forbidden West, which from what we've seen from like developer docs and interviews and stuff like that, it seems like they're really doubling down on the RPG aspects this time around. More towns, more NPCs, more detailed questing, more complex NPCs. Stuff like that is what really has us intrigued. The first game was really cool, but this one could really knock it out of the park. Obviously, the graphics are absolutely insane from what we've seen. The level of detail on the characters, the level of detail on the creatures, the destruction, the lighting, all of it is impressive, but we're just really excited to see where the hell Aloy's story is going to go next. They set up an interesting world here. Now we're just really excited to see how they can keep it going. Now down to number 1, of course, say it with me folks, Elden Ring. This is for a lot of people the most anticipated RPG in quite some time because it is From Software's new game. The people behind Dark Souls, Demon's Souls, Bloodborne, Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice. So with that comes expectations of something really cool. From what we've seen, it does look pretty awesome. It looks to take a lot of elements they've learned from their previous games and taking that Soulsborne formula and flipping it on its head once again in an open world setting, but with a bit of a FromSoft take and how dungeons are laid out and how the difficulty is. The summons seem cool, the abilities seem cool, the character building seems RPG as hell and good and satisfying. There's horses, there's crazier creatures in the open world. The potential for greatness is really high, and I'm not gonna lie, people are letting themselves get hyped up about this one. You know, it seems like the skepticism is pretty low here. If Elden Ring turns out to be as good as people are hoping and how people have said, you know, the early access and betas and alphas and stuff of the game were, buckle up for this one, man. Those are the 2022 RPGs. One last one we wanted to throw in as a bonus that we couldn't fit, Marvel's Midnight Suns. More of a strategy game, but it's got some RPG elements, and we're excited to see what comes of it as comic book fans. Oh, also, and one more, Lies of P. We've only got brief glimpses of this kind of Souls-like RPG, but it seems really awesome. Is it going to make it in 2022? We're not quite sure. We think it might squeak into 2023, but still, it's really intriguing as a concept, and we just wanted to mention it real quick.